Usually when we talk about a sporting event or, well, even a live performance, there is this expectation of precision.
Right, like engineering or something.
Exactly, like engineering. You break your arm on the field, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is. Broken or not broken, you won or you lost.
It is a clean, comforting reality.
Right, things are neatly categorized into definitive outcomes. But you step into the world of professional wrestling, and specifically the narrative landscape of WWE, and that x-ray machine is, it is utterly useless.
Oh, totally useless.
You're looking at a diagnostic environment that is incredibly murky. A win does not always mean you succeeded, and a loss does not always mean you failed.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, the audience is effectively the third competitor in the ring, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And their reaction dictates the reality of the situation far more than, the referee's hand hitting the mat for a 3 count.
Well, we are jumping headfirst into those muddy waters today. We have a massive stack of sources covering the fallout from WWE Backlash.
The one from May 9th, 2026, right? It's down at the Benchmark International Arena in Tampa.
That is the one. We are analyzing the official event results and cross-referencing them directly with just raw, unfiltered fan reactions from 2 massive Reddit communities.
The RWWE and R² subreddits.
Yes, and the core of this deep dive is really exploring how a comparatively small 5-match card managed to completely divide, captivate, and, well, satisfy a global audience.
All while simultaneously sparking these fierce debates about the modern state of wrestling storytelling.
Right. Because, okay, let's unpack this. We're seeing casual fans jumping onto message boards claiming this relatively short event was significantly better than the entirety of WrestleMania 42.
Which is wild when you think about the scale of WrestleMania.
Right.
But to understand why this event struck such a chord, we really have to examine the shifting cognitive load placed on the modern wrestling fan.
Cognitive load. Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the official broadcast for Backlash ran for roughly 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Just under 3 hours.
Exactly. It featured exactly 5 matches and 1 major announcement segment. Now, in an era where modern mega events can stretch across 2 entire nights.
Consuming up to 10 hours of your weekend sometimes.
Right. A sub-3-hour show
Yeah.
fundamentally alters how an audience processes the action.
Think about the last time you watched a 3-hour movie that dragged in the middle. You start checking your phone. You lose the emotional thread of the story.
Yeah, your attention wanders.
So if WrestleMania Night 1 is this all-you-can-eat buffet where you leave feeling bloated and exhausted because you were forced to consume filler just to get your money's worth, Backlash was like a tight 5-course tasting menu.
That is a great analogy.
Every single dish had a specific purpose.
And that curation eliminates what the industry calls death spots on a card.
Death spots.
Yeah, so when you have a massive 8-hour event, promoters inherently have to schedule matches that act as cool-down periods.
Oh, right, like intentional filler.
Exactly. They are intentionally less intense so the audience can catch their breath. But with only 5 matches, every single bout has room to breathe, and more importantly, the in-ring action just feels vital.
And fans on R² immediately picked up on this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Multiple users pointed out how the presentation made the wrestling itself feel vastly more important.
I saw one fan contrasted it directly with the recent Saturday night's main event formats.
Yes, because despite being branded as premium specials, those Saturday night shows often feel like just an extra weekly television episode.
Because the flow is constantly interrupted by commercial breaks.
Exactly. But Backlash felt unrelenting.
We also have to factor in the international audience here. The sources show this huge surge of praise from overseas viewers.
The UK fans were especially vocal.
Yeah, users specifically from the UK, like PromiseOwn5995, were explicitly praising the shorter runtime. They were begging for more PLEs, which is WWE's term for premium live events, what we used to call pay-per-views, to be this streamlined.
Which makes total sense. When you are watching in London, you are navigating brutal time zones.
A show starting at 1 a.m. local time is a massive commitment.
It really is. So a tight, paced show that ends before the sun comes up is infinitely easier to consume live.
This signals a potential paradigm shift in consumer preference, don't you think?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, the promoter's mindset was more is more. Pack the card, ensure every top star gets a payday, give the live crowd maximum volume.
But WWE has been aggressively prioritizing international markets over the last few years.
Right. So by shifting to a quality over quantity model, they are acknowledging that viewer fatigue is a real threat to subscriber retention.
Because when you curate a sub-3-hour experience, the audience retains their emotional energy from the opening bell all the way to the main event.
Exactly.
But wait, if you only have 5 matches, the margin for error effectively vanishes.
Oh, completely.
There is nowhere to hide on a 5-match card. If one match falls flat, 20% of your entire premium live event just tanked.
Yeah, it is a huge risk.
Yeah. That puts an unbelievable amount of pressure on the opening match to set an almost impossible standard, doesn't it?
Pressure is immense. The opening contest has to immediately justify the price of admission and set the kinetic pace for the rest of the evening.
Which is why putting Braun Breaker and Seth Rollins in that slot was a highly calculated, high-reward decision.
And they did not waste a single millisecond. I mean, the bell rings, and Breaker instantly goes for a spear.
Right out of the gate.
Yeah, it immediately communicates the intensity and the deep animosity between these two.
And for context for those listening, Breaker was Rollins' former protege in the faction known as the Vision.
Right, so we have a deeply personal mentor versus student dynamic here.
But Rollins, relying entirely on his veteran savvy, anticipates the sheer aggression, counters the spear, and immediately drags the fight to the outside of the ring.
And the physical storytelling in those opening moments was just masterful. Breaker is relying on this explosive, almost animalistic power.
He hits that terrifying suplex that sends Rollins tumbling completely over the top rope.
Which is a bump that requires incredible trust between performers.
Oh, absolutely. And then Breaker is stalking the ringside area, berating his former mentor, yelling that Rollins brought this violent assault upon himself.
But Rollins' resilience in this match is what really stood out in the fan reactions.
He survives this initial onslaught, counters another spear on the outside, and then, in a moment of pure, unadulterated arrogance, blows a kiss to his former oracle, Paul Heyman.
And that singular act of hubris is where the psychology of the match elevates.
How so?
Well, Rollins goes for his signature stomp, expecting to end the match on his terms, but Breaker counters it by catching Rollins midair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, transitioning seamlessly into a military press gutbuster.
To intercept a veteran mid-maneuver and drop him across your own knee requires a terrifying level of strength and precision.
It perfectly visually encapsulates Braun's raw power, neutralizing Rollins' athletic experience.
And the punishment Rollins absorbed was staggering. The sources detail him taking giant lariats, essentially getting turned inside out to make Breaker look like an unstoppable force.
In wrestling terminology, Rollins was working overtime to put over Breaker.
Right. Sacrificing his own physical well-being to elevate the younger star's credibility in the eyes of the audience.
But Rollins refuses to stay down. They end up on the top rope, and Rollins hits this ring-shaking superplex, rolling through with the momentum to hit a Falcon Arrow.
But Breaker counters that Falcon Arrow into a Falcon Arrow of his own.
And the Reddit threads exploded during that specific sequence. Fans were universally calling the match excellent.
With a significant portion of users arguing it was on the exact same level as the eventual match of the night.
Seth Rollins received widespread acclaim for his willingness to put his body on the line.
But the match structure also smartly protected both men through external variables.
Right, the chaos towards the end.
Chaos erupts. Rollins manages to hit a pedigree and finally connects with the stomp, but before he can capitalize, he is distracted by sudden interference.
From the World Tag Team Champions, Austin Theory and Logan Paul.
Exactly. This distraction gives Breaker the crucial seconds he needs to recover.
And then Rollins attempts an avalanche stomp from the top rope, but Breaker counters with a rib-cracking spear midair.
That visual was insane, and then he follows it up with a mesmerizing torpedo spear to secure the win.
It stands as one of the biggest victories of Braun Breaker's career. But, what is critical to analyze here is the audience's reaction to that interference.
Here is where it gets really interesting. Normally, if you spend 10 minutes reading a wrestling forum, you will see fans complaining bitterly about outside interference.
Oh, they hate it. They view it as lazy booking.
Right, a crutch used by writers who do not know how to write a clean ending. But here, the fans on R² Circle were completely forgiving of Theory and Paul getting involved.
They loved the match.
So how does WWE selectively train its audience to accept something they usually despise?
It comes down to the difference between a structural crutch and character-driven continuity.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, the interference here made narrative sense. The faction known as the Vision has deeply established lore involving Theory and Paul.
Right.
The audience accepts interference when it feels like a logical extension of an ongoing larger story rather than a sudden, random event designed purely to rob the hero of a win.
It enhances the specific character dynamics rather than masking a poorly constructed match.
Exactly.
That distinction perfectly bridges us to the second match of the night, which also heavily featured outside interference, but utilized an entirely different flavor of crowd psychology.
You were talking about the United States Championship match.
Yes, featuring Trick Williams defending against Sami Zayn. This was a highly anticipated rematch from their encounter at WrestleMania 42.
And the atmosphere in that Tampa arena sounded absolutely deafening.
The live crowd was entirely unglued from the moment Trick Williams' music hit.
The entire arena was serenading the champion with "Whoop That Trick" chants.
Trick leaned into his size advantage early on, using his long legs and swift, powerful kicks to keep the much more technically grounded challenger at bay.
And Sami Zayn is widely considered one of the most masterful storytellers of this generation.
Oh, undoubtedly.
When his technical game plan starts failing, he begins showing visible theatrical frustration. He
Yeah.
actually picks up the heavy steel ring steps and actively threatens the champion with them.
It devolves from a wrestling match into a total slugfest. Zayn hits a picture-perfect blue thunderbomb to regain control, and then he pulls out a maneuver straight out of the 1980s villain playbook.
The fake injury.
Yes, Zayn feigns a serious new injury, clutching his leg to draw the referee's attention and force Trick to lower his guard.
Classic. And the moment Trick hesitates, Zayn suddenly recovers and cracks him with a candy cane kendo stick.
A candy cane kendo stick is the exact kind of absurd detail that makes wrestling so unique.
It really is.
But that strike wasn't enough to put Trick away, and then we get the narrative payoff.
Right, with Lil Yachty.
Rapper Lil Yachty, who had accompanied Trick to the ring, gets his hands on that very same kendo stick and smacks Zayn across the back with it.
And Zayn is furious, turns his attention to the outside, and hits a devastating Helova kick on Lil Yachty.
But that momentary distraction allows Williams to capitalize, hitting his finisher, the Trick shot, for the victory.
And the post-match celebration features Lil Yachty recovering and literally making it rain money inside the ring.
The fan reception to this bout was overwhelmingly positive. Many users stated this drastically improved upon the WrestleMania encounter.
Sami Zayn was universally lauded for his pure skill in manipulating the crowd.
User Rusty Prisk pointed out that when it comes to the pure art of crowd manipulation, knowing exactly when to stall, when to beg off, and when to cheat to draw maximum ire Zayn is virtually unmatched.
Trick, meanwhile, perfectly rode the wave of that undeniable mainstream swagger.
Again, we see outside interference, this time from a celebrity musician, and the hardcore fans embrace it. Why?
Because Lil Yachty's involvement was a fun, celebrity-integrated payoff that fit Trick Williams' cultural presentation perfectly.
The interference was the seasoning on an already excellent steak.
Exactly. It highlighted Trick's mainstream appeal versus Sami's desperate, veteran trickery.
And when you have a card this tight, you have to constantly vary the emotional frequency.
Yeah, we started with intense physical realism and mentor betrayal. We moved to a swagger-filled, celebrity-infused title defense.
To keep the audience engaged, the booking took a sharp left turn into pure, unfiltered, theatrical absurdity.
And this is where the fandom fractured.
Big time. The third match of the night was a tag team contest featuring the enigmatic Danhausen and a mystery partner taking on the team of The Miz and Kit Wilson.
The campiness style was completely broken off here.
Danhausen attempts to use a machine to clone himself.
Right, and his mystery partner is revealed to be Minihausen, a smaller, identically dressed clone.
During the match, Kit Wilson tries to shove Minihausen back into the cloning machine to get rid of him, but inadvertently triggers a malfunction,
unleashing an entire army of Minihausens who swarm the ringside area.
It was absolute, unmitigated mayhem.
The visual of dozens of identically painted smaller wrestlers swarming the veteran competitors is pure comic book logic brought to life.
The Miz attempts to use a fire extinguisher to blind Danhausen and regain control. But because of a curse placed on him earlier, the extinguisher backfires, blinding Miz and Wilson instead.
And Danhausen hits a pump kick and wins.
The Reddit threads for this specific match serve as a fascinating psychological study into the duality of the modern wrestling fan.
It is a deeply polarizing segment.
Totally. On one side of the debate, you have fans who adored the tonal shift.
One user described it as a hilarious comedy match, noting that Miz and Kit Wilson leaned into the absurdity, playing the roles of full 1990s WWF-style villains.
By embracing the camp, it actually made the fans appreciate their heel work more.
Yeah, user Joey Croft 5 loved the unpredictability. They stated they half expected Minnighausen to be shoved into the cloning machine and come out as a Braun Strowman-sized monster wearing the exact same face paint.
Which would have been an incredible visual gag.
Oh, completely.
But the opposition was fierce. User 99th Liftbellon called the entire segment a flop and a circus act.
Their core argument was that Danhausen is an experienced, capable in-ring performer, and WWE should have simply let him wrestle a standard match.
They also pointed out that a variation of the clone joke was used at WrestleMania, making this feel like recycled material.
That same user specifically complained that Minnighausen was allowed to hit 4 Hurricane Ranas during the chaos.
Right. Their frustration stems from the belief that allowing a comedy character to execute complex athletic maneuvers devalues those moves when serious competitors use them later in the show.
It reignites the eternal debate, right?
Yeah.
Should professional wrestling present itself strictly as a serious athletic simulation, or should it fully embrace its identity as absurd interactive theater?
Integrating both styles seamlessly on the same card is the eternal challenge for bookers. But the broadcast quickly transitioned from controversial comedy to a major structural announcement.
The John Cena segment.
Yes, John Cena makes his way to the ring to announce the creation of the John Cena Classic, a new tournament spanning both WWE and the NXT developmental brand.
The hook being that the winner is decided entirely by fan voting, rather than scripted match victories.
This announcement raised significant eyebrows regarding the breach of the industry's foundational illusion, often referred to as kayfabe.
Because in wrestling, the unspoken contract with the audience is that everyone pretends it is a legitimate athletic contest, even though every viewer over the age of 10 knows popularity dictates who management chooses to push toward the top.
Right, so by stripping away that facade and making the tournament literally about voting, it fundamentally alters the interactive dynamic.
It turns a simulated sport into a literal reality show popularity contest.
And the reaction to Cena himself delivering this news was surprisingly muted, if not outright cynical.
Yeah, user Raspberry Slushy 21 commented, "Hard to believe he's retired when this was his 3rd appearance in 5 months."
Look at the mechanics of the retirement tour in entertainment. Is John Cena just pulling a classic rock band move?
It certainly feels like it.
It feels like we are witnessing a 5-year farewell tour, where the band keeps coming back to play the hits because the promoter needs to sell tickets.
This points to a broader issue of nostalgia fatigue. WWE heavily relies on Cena's legacy for credibility and mainstream media attention, especially when launching new initiatives like this tournament.
But for the hardcore fan tracking the product week to week, his constant low-stakes returns severely diminish the emotional impact of his supposed retirement.
When the grand farewell becomes a revolving door of cameo appearances, the audience stops mourning the loss of the legend and starts feeling fatigued by the transparent marketing tactic.
Thankfully, the emotional core of the evening was waiting to completely reset the tone. We moved from comedy and corporate announcements to a match that had fans universally captivated.
Leaving them questioning the future of a legitimate pioneer.
IYO SKY versus Asuka.
This was undeniably the match of the night. It was an absolute war built on months of recent on-screen animosity, but more importantly, years of deep, real-world respect.
The sources described the striking in this match as uniquely brutal. They refused to stay confined between the ropes, taking the fight to the outside and brawling violently on top of the announce table.
And there was this incredible moment of ring awareness that fans immediately latched onto.
The notebook spot.
Yes, Asuka attempts to use her signature mist, a blinding liquid she spits into her opponent's eyes. But IYO anticipates it, grabs commentator Wade Barrett's thick notebook, and uses it as a physical shield to block the mist.
That spot is brilliant storytelling. It visually demonstrates that IYO knows Asuka so intimately that she anticipated the desperation tactic and creatively used the immediate environment to neutralize it.
The resilience shown by both women was staggering. IYO took a hellacious beating, collapsing in a heap at one point.
Asuka locked in the devastating Asuka lock multiple times, transitioning into a brutal armbar, but IYO simply refused to submit.
Ultimately, IYO finds her opening, scales the top turnbuckle, hits her breathtaking over the moonsault, and secures the clean victory, finally exercising her demons.
But it is what happened after the bell rang that sent absolute shockwaves through the fandom.
An intensely emotional Asuka approaches IYO, embraces her longtime friend and foe in the center of the ring, and then takes a moment to explicitly, tearfully thank the fans in attendance.
The reaction on Reddit was immediate, profound, and deeply analytical. One user noted that if they had to cast a vote for the newly announced John Cena Classic based purely on tonight's performances, they would vote for Asuka solely because of the emotional depth of this aftermath.
But the dominant narrative taking over the threads was the intense speculation regarding her future.
User Chocolate Turtle 456 asked the question everyone was thinking, did Asuka retire? If she didn't, what happened after the match was really weird.
To understand why fans immediately jumped to retirement, we have to look at the deeply rooted history between these two women.
Another user beautifully detailed the legacy of their connection, providing context that casual viewers might miss.
Right, because when Asuka was first establishing her career in the Japanese Joshi wrestling scene, she actively teamed with Io's older sister.
Asuka recognized Io's phenomenal talent long before American or Mexican promoters ever took notice.
There is a profound mentor-protege dynamic that spans multiple continents and decades of industry evolution.
Fans also began connecting these emotional in-ring moments to recent real-world business news.
The release of Kairi-san.
Yes, the sources show multiple mentions of the recent corporate release of Kairi-san. Fans speculated that releasing Kairi actually makes total logical sense if management knew Asuka was retiring.
Because it leaves Kairi without a storyline anchor or a faction.
Exactly. Some fans express regret that Kairi could not be there to provide a fitting, conclusive image to the entire trio's long-running storyline.
Wrestling retirements are notoriously fluid. The concept of leaving your boots in the ring often turns into a multi-year hiatus rather than a permanent end.
As one fan suggested, it might be a partial retirement or simply walking away to let her body heal and recharge her batteries.
But the emotional weight of staying in the ring, doing the honors of putting over a longtime friend whom you have known since her sister brought her into the business, and formally bowing to the crowd. Well, it possesses all the narrative hallmarks of a definitive passing of the torch.
If this truly is the end of Asuka's in-ring career, how does this final image-embracing Io, after a violent, grueling war, recontextualize her legacy?
It is a great question. Asuka debuted in WWE as an unstoppable, undefeated force of nature. She was the one ending careers and snapping streaks.
To have her final chapter be one of supreme vulnerability, where she passes her hard-earned status down to the next generation of Japanese talent that she personally helped cultivate, I mean, it is beautiful, cyclical storytelling.
It grants her legacy a profound sense of grace that very few performers ever achieve.
It was a universally loved moment that resonated across every demographic of the fandom.
But in classic WWE fashion, the broadcast transitioned immediately from universal emotional resonance to the absolute powder keg of the evening.
The main event, the match that set the internet on fire and exposed the deepest fractures in the fan base.
World Heavyweight Champion Roman Reigns, defending his title against his own cousin, the man known as the Samoan Werewolf, Jacob Fatu.
This match was a physical spectacle from the opening bell. Roman Reigns, heavily leaning into his original tribal chief persona, had spent weeks questioning if Fatu possessed the psychological readiness for a main event title match.
Fatu answered that question by immediately attacking Reigns and locking in the Tongan death grip.
He applied it early and often. Fatu was portrayed not just as a challenger, but as an absolute killer who felt no intimidation.
He powerbombed Roman Reigns directly through the announce table, a visual meant to establish dominance.
When Reigns attempted to mount a comeback and hit his signature Superman punch, Fatu kicked out at a 1 count.
It required a second, immediate Superman punch just to slow his momentum.
The athletic sequence that had everyone talking occurred midway through the match. Reigns charges for his devastating spear, and Fatu counters it midair.
Catching Reigns and transitioning into a massive pop-up Samoan drop, followed instantly by his signature moonsault.
The agility required for a man of Fatu's sheer mass to execute that sequence is staggering.
But Roman Reigns kicked out at the last possible microsecond.
The underlying psychology here was that Fatu possessed all the physical tools necessary to win the championship, but he lacked the ruthless, rule-bending survival instinct that has defined Roman's tenure at the top of the industry.
Which brings us to the highly controversial finish.
Fatu locks in the Tongan death grip yet again. Roman is visibly fading. The title is slipping away. What does the champion do?
He blatantly gouges Fatu's eyes.
In the chaotic process of breaking the hold, he inadvertently, or perhaps intentionally, downs the referee.
With the official incapacitated, Roman violently rips the protective cover off the top turnbuckle, sends Fatu face first into the exposed steel ring structure, breaking the grip permanently, and hits one final spear to retain the title.
For anyone unfamiliar with the terminology, that is a textbook dusty finish.
A chaotic ending involving knocked-out referees and rule-breaking that leaves the actual result murky and highly contested.
But the match ending was only half the story. The post-match chaos is what truly elevated the tension and the subsequent online debate.
Fatu recovers from the spear surprisingly quickly.
He furiously attacks Reigns, locks him in the tongue and death grip again, and when the recovering referee tries to intervene, Fatu absolutely obliterates the official with a pop-up Samoan drop.
WWE backstage officials have to swarm the ring to separate them.
Fatu stands tall, holding the World Heavyweight title high over a completely devastated Roman Reigns.
Roman, broken and lying on the mat, grabs a microphone and hoarsely declares that Fatu doesn't belong here and that tonight is his last night in WWE.
That chaotic finish ripped open a massive pre-existing divide in the WWE fandom regarding the macro-level booking of the tribal chief himself.
The Reddit threads on r²Circle immediately turned into a war zone of conflicting philosophies on how wrestling should be presented.
Let's break down this divide systematically because it touches on the very core of modern wrestling mechanics. First, let's analyze the specific criticism leveled at Jacob Fatu.
Fans widely praised him, calling him a killer and marveling at his athleticism.
But user Chocolate Turtle 456 pointed out a major structural gripe. Fatu constantly no-sells everyone's offense.
When fans talk about no-selling, they're referring to a performer taking a devastating, high-impact move and reacting physically as if it did not hurt at all.
The user noted that while they understand Fatu is supposed to be this terrifying Samoan werewolf, he needs to at least act slightly dazed after absorbing major maneuvers instead of popping right back up immediately.
When the physics of the match do not seem to apply to one specific competitor, it shatters the suspension of disbelief for the hardcore audience.
The physical storytelling after the final bell amplified this frustration perfectly. Fatu gets pinned, takes a spear into exposed steel, but gets right up to destroy the referee and stand tall.
Meanwhile, Roman Reigns officially won the match, but he is laying prone on the ground, looking utterly destroyed.
User Edivad asked the profound question, does a win even mean anything if you look like the loser when the bell rings?
They noted that this visual dissonance might be intentional narrative design.
Roman only survived by cheating, proving to the audience that Jacob is physically superior and will eventually win when the playing field is level.
It protects Fatu's aura as an unstoppable monster while safely keeping the championship belt on Reigns.
The fanbase is already mapping out the long-term strategy. They believe WWE is intentionally keeping Fatu looking incredibly strong to build anticipation for a massive SummerSlam rematch.
One fan pitched an incredibly compelling idea. What if Fatu is sent away, only to be mentored by someone who has a deep historical hatred for Roman Reigns?
They suggested CM Punk, comparing the dynamic to Rocky Balboa training Adonis Creed to fight a common enemy.
That would be a masterstroke of booking, tying decades of real-world continuity and backstage animosity into the on-screen product.
But the booking of this specific match relying on the dusty turnbuckle finish deeply frustrated a vocal segment of the audience.
When we connect this to historical WWE booking trends, we see a pattern of institutional frustration.
User Skidmarks187 compared this finish directly to the infamous Seth Rollins versus The Fiend Hell in a Cell match from years ago,
where a match designed to be brutal ended in a bizarre referee stoppage.
They complained, how about pull a trigger on the guy you're trying to make look like a killer for once?
Another user chimed in, claiming, Triple H never pulls any trigger.
Fans clearly expected a clean, decisive passing of the torch, not a convoluted referee bump to protect the champion.
Which leads us to the broader systemic frustration with Roman Reigns' current era as champion. There is a deep, lingering resentment regarding his schedule.
One user bluntly laid out the mathematics of his appearances. We have the champion for 3 weeks, then a month off, then a build to SummerSlam for him to lose. Any real fan would rather someone who's actually around.
It is the ultimate part-timer critique.
But look at the defense mounted by user Icongrist, who pointed out that the event took place on May 9th, Roman is scheduled for television the rest of May, and he is only taking the month of June off.
The fandom is literally hyper-analyzing his PTO calendar to validate their arguments.
Because his physical presence dictates the entire hierarchy of the company.
But what is truly compelling here is an observation made by user AdChicheek98 regarding Roman's character dynamic.
What did they say?
They noted, Roman Reigns is consistently acting like a heel bastard, but WWE presents him as a babyface. Have I accidentally been transported back to 2015?
For those who might not remember the dark days of 2015, that was the era where WWE management was desperately trying to force the audience to love Roman Reigns as a heroic, underdog babyface.
The audience violently rejected it, relentlessly booing him out of the building, culminating in that disastrous Royal Rumble reaction.
Exactly. But look at how the dynamic has completely inverted over the last decade.
He is actively cheating, gouging eyes, and using exposed turnbuckles, classic villain tactics. Yet, the live crowds are actively cheering his survival.
It has created this bizarre but utterly captivating aura where traditional morality in wrestling no longer applies to him.
As one fan noted, this is actually my favorite Roman match. It just hits so different when he fights family.
The familial stakes supersede the morality of his actions.
But the blatant inconsistency of the rules is driving the detail-oriented fans insane.
User Itberry pointed out a massive discrepancy in how the matches are officiated. In a previous match, when Gunther put AJ Styles to sleep, the referee called for the bell instantly to protect the competitor.
But in the main event, when Fatu made Roman pass out with the Tongan death grip, the referee held Roman's arm up for an absolute eternity, refusing to call the match and giving Roman time to recover.
It highlights a fascinating narrative theory proposed by another user. They suggested that this isn't a botch or a mistake by the referee, it is intentional world building.
WWE wants to subtly reinforce the idea that Roman Reigns is the company.
Therefore, you have to go against the entire corporate structure to defeat him. The referees, the timing, the rules themselves subtly bend to protect the company's biggest asset.
So is WWE intentionally making the rules inconsistent to make Roman the ultimate final boss?
A champion who essentially has the very code of the video game rigged in his favor. It is brilliant, infuriating storytelling.
His title reign has entirely transcended traditional wrestling narratives. Think about the concept of artificial scarcity in luxury markets. Supreme drops, Rolex waitlists.
By limiting the supply of Roman Reigns matches, WWE creates immense demand and anxiety.
He does not need to be there every week because his absence creates anticipation.
And his vulnerability against family members like Fatu makes every match feel incredibly perilous despite the historical odds and the systemic protection.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, unpacking the psychology, the business metrics, and the intense emotional reactions to this event.
Let's synthesize all of this. What are the core takeaways from our deep dive into these sources?
Backlash 2026 proved a fundamental thesis for the modern era. A shorter, tightly curated 5-match card with high stakes and deep emotional storytelling like we witnessed with Asuka and IYO SKY satisfy casual and international fans far more effectively than a bloated mega event.
It respects the viewer's cognitive load.
Meanwhile, the macro booking of Roman Reigns continues to be the most polarizing, heavily debated topic in the industry.
He is a champion who wins while looking physically broken, who employs villainous tactics but is cheered like a returning hero.
And whose corporate schedule is debated just as fiercely as his actual in-ring performances.
Whether you are a casual fan who just wants a fast-paced, action-packed 3-hour watch before going to sleep, or you are a hardcore Reddit user armed with a stopwatch tracking the exact speed of a referee's arm drop, this event provided ample material to validate your specific perspective.
You could walk away completely satisfied with the pacing, or you could log off armed with a dozen new conspiracy theories about the structural booking of the main event.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as we wrap up.
If a champion's greatest asset is the ferocious, unending debate they generate when they're not even on television, has WWE finally figured out how to successfully monetize absences?
Think about the mechanics of artificial scarcity the next time you tune in, or the next time you find yourself passionately arguing on a message board. Are you fighting against the system, or are you playing exactly into their narrative design?
That is definitely something to chew on.
Going back to where we started, wrestling is not an X-ray. It is not a clean, visible break. It is murky, it is messy, and its success is entirely dependent on how you, the audience, interpret the shadows in the water. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources, and as always, stay curious.